I'm not a professor. I'm a politician. Just so you understand where I work, I've been 20 years, and I am the mayor of Arlington County, right across the river from Washington, D.C. Some of you may have been there. That's where the national airport is, the Arlington Cemetery, and the Pentagon there in my community. My community is a national model for some things around sustainability, particularly the smart growth, if you know this term, the integration of land development and buildings and transportation. And now, on top of that, the environment. We have a long history of this. I was very interested in your presentation because much of my history is to create a mixed-use community where there are offices and residents together and not separate. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition for me. Today I will speak about the Washington metropolitan area, and hopefully, and you will determine how this applies, we'll try to make some connection to the concept of a mega region. Even though our Washington metropolitan area, size-wise, is clearly smaller, there are maybe some lessons to be learned. And my focus will be on economic sustainability, so economic development. The three things I will talk about today are on the overview of our region, the Washington metropolitan region, its assets and its challenges, a framework for economic development as it works in our area, and looking at the different levels of government, federal, state, local, and regional. And then I will talk a little at the end about the current Amazon relocation or establishment of a second headquarters. This is our region. 2 states, Maryland and Virginia, and the District of Columbia, which is both a local government and a state, all in one. This is a little unusual in the United States to have a region that has 2 different states. It's not alone, but it is not typical. So we have 2 states, the district, 13 major local governments, and then many smaller towns. Most local governments are within just 1 state. As Jim Moran, our congressman, said the other day, some people envision a broader region in the future, from Baltimore, Maryland, through Washington, all the way down to the capital of Virginia, which is Richmond. These are our assets. These are the things that define the Washington metropolitan area. Very highly educated on the top left, the most in the United States, the highest. Down the bottom we have 3 major airports, many embassies, and a very real international experience and identity. We are one of the most educated, I said educated, but the workforce. We have a strongly educated workforce with many millennials, the younger educated folks. Colleges and universities, one of the highest levels of research and development, down on the bottom right, for our college and university system. 3.2 million jobs, 5.5 million people, and a very strong innovation hub, actually, next to Silicon Valley. Some would say it's number 2. Our unemployment right now in the region is very low. In the district, it's about 6%. In Maryland, the state to the north, is about 4%, and in Virginia, it's about 3% unemployment. My locality has had the lowest for 10 years, 2.5. When you look at the major industry sectors in the Washington metropolitan area, it's professional and business services, government, because we are with the federal government, rests in our region, and education and health services. And these are a few of the major employers in the Washington metropolitan area. Many federal agencies, many of them do research and related research, from defense to Homeland Security, to health, National Institutes of Health. And because of that, there are many defense contractors and government contractors. Much of their role is the integration. We have been looking at the integration, how to take the products created by the federal government with taxpayer money and to commoditize them and create marketable products. So many in the private sector spend time trying to do that. Ed tech, med tech, cybersecurity, these are the jobs of the future in the Washington metropolitan area. Increasingly, in my locality and throughout the region, there's a focus on startups. In the past, we looked for big employers, large employers that brought many people. Now we are equally looking at small firms, small 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, because some portion of these will be successful and will bring many jobs later. Despite our assets, like everyone else, we have our challenges. That dependence on the federal government was too much a basis of our economy. It is slowly going down. We are creating a much more vibrant alternative private sector. We have recognized in recent years that we have a very low export intensity from our region. So there is now a new initiative to increase the pie, grow the pie, not just divide it, which is something I will speak to later, but to grow our exports from the region. Aging infrastructure, this is metro, we've heard about this, I think this is probably an issue in China too, a lot of many new shiny things, but if you don't invest in maintaining those things, they don't stay shiny. In 10 or 20 years, they need investment. They need to be sustained. Our metro system was beautiful and shiny 25 and 30 years ago, and it needs reinvestment. And because of our fragmented levels of government, it is proving to be very challenging to find a dedicated funding source for the capital reinvestment in our metro system, despite how fundamentally important it is to the economy of the region. We have relatively high costs. I didn't see it yesterday in a presentation, but Washington has some of the worst road congestion in the country. And this has come up as a theme. Richard Florida now speaks to this, the equity and social justice question. And it is for someone that works at the local level on policy, the most tangible impact of social justice is in housing. We have a very challenging issue with affordability of housing in my community and in the core of the Washington region. And then jurisdictional fragmentation. It's a little different in America than it is here, maybe. I'm not always clear about how it works here in China, but I know that in the United States, and I will get to this in a minute, these levels of government in our region that crosses 2 states and the district becomes challenging for us. So I'll move into more specifically economic development as a decision-making process in the region. You have the state of Virginia, the state of Maryland, and the District of Columbia. You have in Virginia and Maryland a governor, you have a legislature, and then you have local governments. The local governments are only the major ones. When you get to economic development, it's only the major jurisdictions that have the investment and have the role. But you also have other players, other factors. They don't necessarily have authority, but they have a role to play. So on the bottom right, the Council of Governments is the regional body for all the local governments, where they come together to talk, to share ideas, to create a vision for the region. But they have no power in law to force something to happen. Then you have the business community, and there are some that are very regional, from Virginia to Maryland and the District of Columbia, like the Board of Trade, the Greater Washington Partnership, the 2030 group. These are all business groups. In every locality, every county like mine, we also have a chamber of commerce. So there are many, many chambers of commerce that all have a voice in the discussion. So the individual roles of these levels of government. What is the local government role in economic development? First, it's important to know that every local government is responsible for its own budget. The money that each government gets from the federal government and the state varies, but in many, like mine, it's very little. The money generated to run my government, to provide all the services from education on down, the majority of that, the vast majority, comes from the local government and our revenue sources. And in Virginia, we have very few choices because the state tells us what revenue sources we have and we do not have. So the primary revenue source for local governments in Virginia in particular is around your real estate, the value of your land. So there is great pressure on local government budgets, and you look for high value, low cost, and the high value, low cost is commercial. For residential, if you have residential, you have children. Children are very expensive. So the more commercial activity you have as a proportion of your revenue, the lower the better it is for the voters, because they have to pay the less, the people that vote, and the homeowners that own land. So the more commercial you have, the better. My jurisdiction is interesting. It's 50-50. But you go further out to the suburb, to the areas out, it's 80-20. 80% for the homeowner that owns a house, 20% commercial, because there is less commercial the further you go outside. So the larger localities have either an economic development department, a part of the government, an office, or they have an authority, which is a little more a little more autonomy. And that's a choice that you have. The role, we'll get to the state in a minute, but sometimes when the state will find someone to come to the locality has to match some money. They can either put in an infrastructure investment to match, they can put in cash to match, they can provide breaks on taxes, but that's something I want to talk about because it becomes a problem for local governments. There is collaboration among local governments, more in the sub-regional. So in Northern Virginia, there's collaboration on workforce development, on tourism, maybe on marketing. Much less so across our larger region, which is closer to what your mega region would look like. The role of the state government is also very strong in economic development. It's, however, very competitive. There is little motivation for collaboration between the states. Businesses, the states will poach, meaning they will try to steal businesses from one state to another. And that's even within a region. So the regional identity is very low. And the state identity is much higher. The states collaborate heavily with local governments. So I am in Virginia. My state government has a very large office to help with marketing, to help with incentives for businesses to move from overseas, from China, from California, from New York. And they do trade missions, so they will help go out and try to make your best case and market your state. So this is just a quote from the Virginia Economic Development Partnership that is part of the state government. They want to do aggressive business recruitment, expansion, all about creating high-paying jobs in their state. And in America, as you all know, and it's sort of the culture to be low taxes. People, they don't like taxes. And as a result, You know, many times in my world, I try to create a quality of life. I try to create a place that attracts people, and to make arguments for the environment, for housing, for transportation. Many times my argument is around it helping the economy. Even the arts. I just saw a report on the arts and how the arts and culture contribute to the economy through direct and indirect jobs in a locality. The regional role is very limited. There are no regional organizations with any true legal authority in the area of economic development, and honestly, in just about any area. Though there are a few areas where regionalism is more important and has a much more substantial role. I'm not going to get into it now, but probably the highest is around emergency preparedness, public safety. You all remember 9/11 in America when the World Trade Center was hit. There was also a plane that hit the Pentagon in my county. So I was the chairman, the mayor, and we had many mutual aid agreements with all the localities in Virginia and in Maryland and the district and the federal government. And it worked very well. After 9/11, there's new federal money. The regionalism in emergency preparedness got even more strong. There's little authority in law, but there is strong coordination, and it is incentivized by federal money for emergency preparedness. At one point, we had a Greater Washington Initiative, an organization for the region, Maryland, Virginia, D.C. It did branding. It did some of the things that were less competitive, more value added. So they would do branding for the region, regional identity, research. They would do the international marketing. That organization disbanded. It does not exist anymore, and it needs to be revitalized in some form. If I look at the region and some of the true successes of regionalism in recent years that brought the business community together, we had a bid for the Olympics in Washington. It was a short term, several year. It was a very successful effort where people forgot they were from Maryland. They forgot that they were from Virginia and the district, and they came together in a very clear way to promote a regional project. And from that project, we've had a new business group identify themselves, which is looking at that Baltimore to Richmond idea. And I mentioned the global exports. The Brookings Institution is working to help create an increased export policy for the Washington metropolitan area. These are a few of the organizations I have mentioned already that are actually have a supporting role, not a legal authority in economic development, but they have a voice. So now I'm going to speak on 2 slides about attracting and retaining businesses. While we have the low unemployment, we have a relatively high vacancy rate of commercial space. We have buildings that do not have tenants. In the district, it's 11%. In Maryland, 15%. And in Virginia, 17%. Why? We had a recession. We had a big building boom. We also had the federal government is so important to our economy, but they have had lots of reductions in money and spending. Sequestration has reduced the money for government contracting. But even on the other side of the equation, on the demand side, the demand for space, businesses are using less space. Have you heard the term hoteling? Years ago, everybody at the business had their office. Nobody has an office anymore. It's an open space and shared space. So now they use much less space than they ever did before. That has helped to create vacancy as well. But there is a lot of effort in the economic development world and among the staff to attract, also to retain businesses for these reasons. However, and this is the next slide, I will spend a little time to talk about the costs to the state and the region of doing this attraction. I thought about this a little, and it has always frustrated me because for many years we did not use any cash and financial incentives. And then people started, the District of Columbia began to pay companies to come. And then you begin to pay companies to stay, not just to come. So as you look at some recent examples, in the top left, it's low cost, high benefit. This is what you want. So when we, for the region, we get a company, my county recently, Nestle, you know, Nestle, chocolate. They moved their headquarters from California to Arlington. This was a big win for the region. Volkswagen from Michigan to Virginia. The worst situation is the bottom right. High costs and low benefits. Advisory board had to pay, so the government had to pay them $60 million in tax breaks and financial incentive to stay in the same locality. Marriott makes a big competition. Everybody competes, tries to get them. $62 million to stay in the same place. I expect you don't have this issue. Then, of course, because we're a region, in the top right, some businesses actually you pay to stay in the region, but they move across the river to a different state. And in the bottom left, this happened to me. This was terrible. NSF, National Science Foundation, leaving my county to go next door to Alexandria, also in the same state. So the state does no money for this because the state, Alexandria, Arlington, are in the same state. So the state gave no money, but the locality also gave money in tax breaks. So when you look at the implications of this, there's a lot of public sector money going to support businesses to get the jobs or to keep the jobs. The strange thing is, we know from all the research that what is it that businesses think about when they choose a site? They look for the workforce, the people. Like Richard Florida said, they used to be the people follow the jobs, now the jobs follow the people. Amenities, restaurants, transportation, airports, and of course, where does the CEO live? Strangely, that becomes a very significant factor. The chief person in the business, do they live nearby? They want a short commute. That becomes an important thing. The financial incentives, in the end, don't make that big a difference. They just use you to make some money and reduce their costs. So it's a cannibalization. It's a poaching. And we are hurting one another because we don't have a regional identity and an ability to communicate among ourselves. Citizens think this is corporate welfare. They hate it, as I do. But if a company leaves, the politician is responsible. So, finally, a few things about Amazon and how this may relate. Amazon announced this on September 7th, 2 months ago. They gave 6 weeks for proposals. Amazon is the largest single economic development. This competition is the largest in the history of North America. It's the world's largest online retailer and the 4th largest company in the world by market capitalization. This is their RFP, their request. It said they wanted to be in a metro area with more than 1 million people. For you, that is a neighborhood. A stable and business-friendly environment. Urban or suburban, but strong talent. The workforce. Communities that think big. Within 30 miles of a population center. To me, that's way too far. 45 minutes to an international airport, near roads, and the most important, maybe, the mass transit at the site. So the last three are about transportation. What did they promise? Up to 50,000 jobs. Of course, as a politician, what do I see? I look at the words up to. Up to, maybe that's 10, maybe that's 10,000, maybe that's 50,000. Everybody thinks 50,000. Average compensation, $100,000 an employee, that's high. $5 billion in capital expenditures on their site, and that they are looking to have phases of growth. So they need 500,000 to 100,000 square feet immediately in 2 years, and then to grow. Brookings, the whole America now is guessing, predicting where they will go. This is the best guesses of the Brookings Institution. And from people I speak to, most people say it will never be the West Coast. San Diego, Los Angeles, San Jose, San Francisco. They want to be on the East Coast, is what most people think. Could they go to Houston, to Texas? Maybe. Could they go to Denver? Maybe. Most likely they will be on the East Coast. And there are other cities on the East Coast. Yesterday we heard about second-tier cities. Might it be Pittsburgh? Might it be Richmond? These are second-tier cities, but still very possible depending upon what their ultimate intentions are. So what happens across America in economic development offices? They set up war rooms like CNN, the war room. Every local and state economic development office. And if you ask me, Amazon got the best publicity the world has ever seen for free. Everybody's talking about Amazon. At the end of the period, they received 238 proposals from 43 states and Canada and Mexico. In the Washington metro area, there were about 18 sites identified, 18 different locations. Some of those were two localities came together to offer sites. In one instance, Arlington and Alexandria, the neighbor that stole National Science Foundation. We still work together. In another, Loudoun County and Fairfax have come together. Some of these are more urban campus, like their Seattle campus. Some are more suburban, but all have metro access. So I equate this as trying to win the lottery. How many people have won the lottery? Nobody I know. But the word is leaking out. The information is private, but you hear about it. New Jersey, in their application proposal, offered $5 to $7 billion in tax breaks over 20 years. Calgary, Canada, offered to change the name of the city to be Kalamazoo or Amagari. Stonecrest, which is a council of 6, voted 4-2 to change the name of the city to Amazon. You can see what I mean about cannibalization, huh? I also had a slide of one of several cities that did not apply, but they wrote in the newspapers, "Dear Amazon, love Little Rock, Arkansas." They expressed how wonderful they are to take the opportunity of the Amazon experience. They put their own information out. They did not apply. They still tried to tack on to the experience. So in Seattle, if you want to understand what the impact may be in your city, what was the experience in Seattle? Clearly, this is in the downtown area of Seattle. It has had a major revitalization effect. They have 8.1 million square feet. It is the dominant employer. Is this healthy for a city? There are the next 43 employers. The Amazon is more dominant has more people than the next 43 employers in the city of Seattle. We spoke of housing. Housing costs are skyrocketing in Seattle, very challenging for people at low income and moderate income to live inside in the city. They have fulfillment centers now in 40 places around America, and over the years have received $1.3 billion in financial incentives from many of those places. As someone at Brookings said, beware of tech CEOs bearing gifts. So finally, my last two slides, some conclusions. Economic development involves multiple levels of government. Economic development is highly competitive. The third one here I think is significant. In America, there's a famous, the words of a famous senator from many years ago in the 1940s, Senator Arthur Vandenberg. He was a Republican, and he was about to become the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee during the administration of a Democrat, Harry Truman. But he said, and if you study international affairs, you hear this all the time, partisanship and politics stops at the water's edge. Meaning, when it comes to foreign affairs, whether we are Democrat or Republican, we come together for the sake of the country. In foreign affairs in America, it's questionable today if this philosophy still exists. But I would argue that for economic development, it is still one of the most nonpartisan and bipartisan issues that local government and state government face. Another conclusion is that local government budgets are tight, and economic development incentives threaten, if they keep getting bigger and bigger, they threaten to deplete our budgets. We need to keep reinvesting in our infrastructure, this metro system, for example. And if we continue to give money to corporations to be in our community for our budgets, we are taking money from that maintenance budget. The next one is probably very relevant to your thinking on regions and mega regions, though it's at a different scale, is if we had greater regional identity and collaboration, we would likely see more economic benefit and reduce the cost. We would not have to be paying those taxes to a corporation. And that local governments should focus on infrastructure. If we are to match a state money, we should do it with investment in our community to make the transportation system better. That's what I have spent 20 years doing, is building a community that is attractive for workers, for young people. We are very vibrant. That is, in my view, the best way, ultimately should be, to attract businesses as well. So that in America, another famous phrase is think globally, act locally. I think we need to rethink this a little to say think globally, act locally and regionally. So a few questions. I don't have all the answers. So some things to leave you with. Businesses have increasingly asserted themselves in American public policy. We recently had in North Carolina the transgender bathroom bill, if you've heard about this. Should a transgender person be able to go to a men's bathroom or a women's? And the conservatives in North Carolina made this a big social issue. PayPal, a big tech company, said, we don't like this. We're going to a different state. This changed the discussion in public policy. Facebook just made a major investment in Virginia, my state, and they required renewable resources to run the facility. The law did not permit this in Virginia because of the power of the utility company. The renewable energy had to be generated in Virginia, not just paid for from another state. They had to change the policy because Facebook is very important. So will Amazon and will other companies consider community goals and visions and revitalization when they make decisions on where to site, where to locate their business and their office? Will Amazon's public national competition lead others to do this and lead to more cannibalization and wasted time? With 237 losers in the lottery and one winner, was it worth it? I would have to think many of the economic development offices are thinking about that right now. With the Olympics, you had a legacy value. The DC Olympics, when they put a proposal forward, it was bringing to life the vision for the District of Columbia and the region. There was a legacy value to go through the exercise and create the plan. With this, it is less clear what the legacy value or the value added is of the localities that entered this competition. And finally, would megaregions benefit from greater collaboration among cities or creating an overarching economic development authority? Okay, thank you very much.